are we? We're just a couple of minutes away from starting. We'll give everybody a few more minutes to come on in and then we'll get started. Okay, so thank you again for coming along. It's right on 10 o'clock, so we are going to get started so that we don't run out of time. So I'm just going to press record. All right, so just to get us started, I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QUT now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits. We recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning. QUT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QUT community. Okay, so what we're doing today, we've got quite a few sections to get through, and the beginning will be a welcome and some basics. And at the end, we've got a Q&A session. So if you have any questions through the session, if you put them in the chat, I may have a chance to stop and address them, or alternatively, it's a good idea if you wait till the Q&A and then we can get a bit more in depth into your questions. There's a few prompts throughout our session today where I'm going to ask you to do some activities. Just if you can jot a few things down and then you can go back later and address those questions a little bit more deeply. And it's also going to help you to start thinking about the writing process and getting your writing strategies into action. So today's resources, the slides are already up on Blackboard. I will put... Oh, thank you. I've got Ola's in with us today. She's just popped this where you can find the student resources on Blackboard. So the slides are there and the recording will be there later on today. So our goals for today is we want to really understand the purpose of your research proposal. We want to look at some strategies that you can implement to inform and persuade the reader about the value of your research, which is, of course, is one of the most important parts of your research, is the value. And also to look at critical thinking and critical writing and how you can improve those skills as well. I want to add here as well that it doesn't really matter which research degree you're enrolled in. There'll be tips and strategies for all of you. We do this with all of our offerings. We make sure that all of our HDRs can utilise these sessions. And also remember that we're focusing on writing skills and strategies, but no matter where you're up to in your candidature, the principles will be similar. So as we're going through the session, think about your own needs depending on where you're up to. So also, of course, the last point is about the critical thinking and critical writing, but we're going to be doing that the whole way through the session, okay, thinking about those issues. So basically, as well as our goals, this is a little bit of a pep talk to really encourage you guys and help you to feel confident that you can find the answers to any questions that you have, and that you're going to come away from this session with some good strategies on how you can write your research proposal, of course. And, you know, even though sometimes the writing can be challenging, I want you to, you know, consider all the skills that you already have regarding writing, and we're going to support those and help you to get even better. So a lot of what we're talking about today is explaining the purpose of the task, why it's important, and the strategies on how to do the task as well. So remember that as we go through, that confidence is really important in writing. So really, I want to help you to stay motivated and feel confident that you can have the answers, or if not, find the answers. So today's a workshop where with our workshops, we tend to be looking at the theory and principles of writing practices. We include that peer discussion in the breakout rooms. And then we also have writing circles as well that you may have seen or even been to, where we then with exemplars and practical activities and opportunities to check your own writing. Okay. So we do have a writing circle on this topic coming up on the 23rd of September. Thank you, Ola. Ola's just put in the link for you guys to register for the writing circle. So that's where we'll be looking at exemplars, and you'll be able to look at your own writing as well, because as this one is a workshop, we don't really look at too many examples as such. Okay, so come along to the writing circle if you can on the 23rd of September. Now, if you want to know more about the things that we talk about today, we've also got some upcoming workshops you can see there, a writing circle as well on writing your lit review. So again, you can register for those on HiQ. And we also have a lot of resources on our Blackboard site as well, which is where I gave you that, or where I'll put that initial link for Blackboard for the resources for today. So today we're talking a lot about, or all about writing, but I also want to highlight that writing, yes, absolutely a skill that you need to work on during your candidature, but there's also a range of skills that you want to develop during your candidature as well. So doing your research degree, you have a lot of opportunities to learn valuable transferable skills. It's never too early to start thinking about and investing time in all of those skills. And you can see this wheel here on the slide. They're the 20 skills that, that we've identified as the ones that HDRs should be looking at improving. And there you can see there, they're divided into 3 settings. Now, to help you to figure out which skills you would want to be improving, we have a HDR skills assessment tool. I'll always put that link into the chat as well. So you can see, you can identify and self-assess those skills to see where you need to improve, and then you can make a plan to start improving those skills. Now, what's really good about this assessment tool is you can also record your experiences. You can say record the activities and sessions you've attended, and that will be useful as well for your annual progress reports, and also looking into the future for your CV when you start applying for jobs. Okay, so that one is the HDR skills assessment tool. We also have an academic writing skills assessment tool. That one's on Blackboard. Similarly, it looks at the different skills you need as an academic writer, and you self-assess, and then the tool will send you information about the different sessions and resources available to help you improve the skills that you've identified that you might need to work on. So I really encourage you, no matter where you are in your candidature, to use both of those tools. All right, so we're going to get started with a few basics. Let's see here. So as I keep saying, you know, we've got lots of resources and tools. I've just told you about a few of them. But these pages are our specific HiQ pages for all of our HDRs. And you can see there I've highlighted your candidature. So that's where all the information is about the administration of your degree, QUT requirements, thesis expectations, guidelines, that sort of thing. Develop research and career skills. That's where you're going to find out all your training opportunities, and engage with your industry. That's a really good one for you guys to have a look around as well. We've got lots of opportunities for you to engage with industry, such as internships. So again, really recommend be informed, use all the resources that we have for you to gain the most as you can from your time here at QUT. All right, so coming to your actual thesis that you're writing, I know we're at the research proposal stage, but ultimately you will have a thesis. Have a think about, and you may have already decided if you're doing the traditional monograph, or if you're by publication, or if you're going to do creative work. So good time now to be thinking which type is right for you. So discuss with your supervisor. You can see the link there that sends you to HiQ that will show you all the guidelines for each type. And it's also a really good idea to check out QUT ePrints for examples. I'll show you a screenshot of that in a minute. But, you know, with your proposal, it's if you already know which type of thesis you're going to write, that's going to help you with your proposal. So you can see here, this is where that link will take you. You can see down the bottom there, types of thesis, and there's some guidelines in there to help you to work out which one is best for you. And of course, talk about it with your supervisor. If you scroll down further on that page, there's also additional information related to the different faculties as well. So that's something I want you to remember too. With all of our writing sessions, we know that all of you are from different faculties, so you have different needs. We talk about the general aspects of writing, and of course then you need to think about how that fits into your field of research and your faculty too. This is a QUT ePrints. You can see down there, you can tick which thesis format you want to look at. So that's really helpful, particularly if you're looking at by publication. It's nice to have some examples of that. And then, of course, you've got the traditional monograph and the creative works as well. So with your research milestones, I find that we get a lot of questions in the writing sessions about the milestone expectations and timeframes. Now, everybody's different, your faculties are different, you're all doing different degrees. So if you've got questions about your milestones, there's a whole lot of information on HiQ and on Blackboard. There's videos on Blackboard that are excellent. And you can also email the Graduate Research Centre. You can see there, hdr@qut.edu.au. And if you have a look here on HiQ, there's a whole section on milestones, and on Blackboard, if you go into that research practices section, you can see there, and there's 2 bits about milestones there. So I really recommend that, that you go in and have a look at those. Now, when most of you will have a staff ID as well as a student ID. So when you're logged in your staff ID, you can also see the QUT Research Division and on HiQ, Digital Workplace, the information there. I've highlighted a few, lots of useful information there, and that'll help you to be part of QUT's researching community. So you can see the login in the chat there. Just make sure you're using your staff ID. If you don't have your staff ID, perhaps ask your supervisor and they might be able to help you to get access to those pages. Okay, so that was all our beginning bits, just to make sure you stay informed and you know where to find all the answers when you have questions. Let's have a look now about writing about research. So what I often do is I ask you guys to start thinking. So there's 2 questions. They've been put in the chat. Thank you, Ola. It's okay if you're not exactly sure about these 2 questions yet, but it is good to have a starting point. So if you can just jot down a couple of words or a sentence to state your research problem, Doesn't have to be written in a perfect way. And then 1 or 2 benefits that you're expecting your research to have. So particularly who's going to benefit and what will be that benefit for those stakeholders. So start to think about that. These 2 critical points, they go hand in hand. And of course, they're the beginning of explaining the value of your research. Now, we are going to come back to these. So if you can just write a couple of points down, that will be really good. And it's just a really nice starting point for you to be beginning to think about all the other questions we're going to pose as we go through today. So we'll check in later to see how you went. So here's an example. If you're not quite sure what you could write here, this might help you a little bit. So example 1, research problem. Sometimes HDRs experience anxiety or lack confidence when writing about their research. So what kind of writing support might help them improve their skills and become confident writers? So that's the problem. Okay, what's the best way to support HDR's writing development? Okay, so who would benefit if HDRs are confident? If we found some able to answer that research problem. So who's going to benefit? Of course, HDRs, supervisors, the faculties, universities, society, might be a stretch, but yes, industry, government. All right. So, but what kind of benefits? Well, for HDRs and supervisors, maybe less stress, better mental health and well-being. On-time completions, well, that's good for everybody, faculties, universities, improves the thesis quality. For society, industry and government, though, I haven't put any kind of benefit as yet. We're going to think about that a bit later on. But that sort of example is what I would be hoping that you could write down for your own research for those questions that we've just posed. Here's another example. Another research problem might be patients who undergo chemotherapy. They often have really debilitating nausea and may need to stay in hospital rather than being able to go home because they're feeling so unwell. So who would benefit if we were able to start to solve this problem? Well, of course, it would be patients, hospitals, the healthcare providers and staff, the patients' families, and again, society and government. So going wider and wider, aren't we? So what kinds of benefits would researching this problem bring? Better patient outcomes, patients can go home, return to work more quickly, perhaps. It's definitely going to reduce the healthcare costs, isn't it? So that could be helping society and government. We'd have more hospital beds for other people. So 2 examples there that might help you to be thinking about those 2 questions that we've posed. What's your research problem and who's going to benefit and how? All right, moving on. So when we think about writing about research, yes, we know reading and writing, they're basic skills, of course, but when we write about research, it's much more complex because it requires another level of writing altogether. There's a lot of hard work. We're developing our skills. So yes, it can be challenging, but if we're confident and we can improve our skills, then we're going to be able to overcome that challenge, aren't we? We always have a lot of questions when we're writing about our research. Am I doing it right? Will I find anything? Is anybody going to care? So these doubts are normal. The answer is yes, people will care if you can engage your readers and you can make the value of your research explicit and clear. So that's a really big theme throughout today. And when you're writing your research proposal is being really clear about why this research is important. So yep, writing can be challenging, but it's also very rewarding as well. So of course, you're doing a research degree, so you're not meant to know everything, but on the flip side, you're also researchers. Okay, so that means you need to examine and think critically and really understand the things that you don't know yet so that you can find those answers. So all that support and information that I mentioned just before, that's one place to start. Of course, the self-assessment tools will help you with that as well. Sorry. Okay, so how do we find out what we don't know? Well, of course, we ask questions, connect with your peers and supervisors, look at all that information. Reading is the key. Reading is how we gain our knowledge. So, you know, all of that reading that you're doing now is going to be worthwhile. And that's going to help you with your knowledge gaps, of course, but with your skill gaps, you're going to need to identify the skills in your research and writing you need to develop, which will happen over time. So make sure you seek support as soon as you can, and of course seek feedback on your writing. So what we want, basically, be active learners, think critically, examine what you know, and then that'll help you to understand what you perhaps don't know. Now, as I said, reading is the key. So do some research about writing. It might sound counterintuitive to read about writing, but believe me, it will really help. Here's some books that I think are very good. They're all available in the QUT library. The one at the bottom, University of Chicago Social Sciences, that's actually a video. It's an excellent video. There's a link in YouTube there. And also thinkwell.com are excellent. It's two people actually, and they have excellent writing guides, planners and productivity, and they actually go all around the world helping researchers to be more productive writers. So jump onto their website and see what they've got. A lot of the things are free, okay, which is really, really awesome. So yes, read about writing to help you improve your skills. I really believe that that's a very good strategy for you guys. All right, so what are the mechanics of what we call good writing? So of course we need to engage the reader, we need to be logical, we need to have evidence-based arguments, and we, as I keep saying, we need to explain the value of our research. So we need to firstly have a clear understanding of what the two main aspects or the mechanics of writing are. So there's two. First one is cohesion. We call that the micro level of your document. So that's the paragraph level. It's making sure your paragraphs are clear and flow well. It's about the words that you're using and your sentences, making sure they're structured correctly and grammatically as well. So the cohesion is the paragraph level, very important. Then, of course, we have the coherence, which is the macro level. It's the big picture. It's the flow of those paragraphs in each section. It's your chapters that are made up of your sections, and it's the big picture, the whole document. So in this case, your research proposal, how it goes from beginning to end, that big picture, and to make sure that everything is clear and linked. Now, with your cohesion and your coherence, sometimes we end up, because we've been writing for a long time, we end up what we call fossilized in bad habits. So maybe there's some kind of sentence structure that you're writing that actually isn't grammatically correct, or maybe you're using words that don't go in the flow of a bigger picture. There's all sorts of different rules around writing and making sure that everything is clear. So how do we know if we're fossilized into bad habits? We seek feedback. So I'm not saying that you're not good writers. You probably are really good writers, but it's also a matter of being able to write in an academic way that fits your field of study, of course. Okay, so how do we know what we need to improve? We write drafts, we proofread, and of course seek feedback, and read and utilize all the support that we have available to us. So when you're proofreading, think about the cohesion, so the paragraph level, and think about the coherence, which is the big picture. So also, in academic writing and when we write about research, there's conventions. So we have specific discourses and conventions related to all of our different fields of study. So this is your referencing style. It's also using the correct language and vocabulary that's used in your field of study. So as you're reading all of your journal articles and starting to do your lit review, take notice of the kind of language that's used in your field. So there's a really basic example there of, we call respondents for survey responses, and we call participants when we're describing who we've gained qualitative data from. Make sure you also are very clear on your referencing style. So use a style manual to check the referencing rules as such. So as I just said, we need to have drafts. So your draft writing, it's essential for you to improve your skills. So even if you're thinking your drafts, you know, oh, I couldn't possibly let anybody read them. Yes, you can, and you should, because that's how you're going to improve. So as far as the knowledge of your field and the content, that's where your supervisors would come in, of course, because they're experts in that field. And as far as your writing skills, realistically, as long as the meaning is there, anyone should be able to read what you've got to give you ideas of whether your meaning is clear or not. So you don't need to have all your ideas fully organized, just write what you're thinking. So it's that iterative and continuous process of thinking, reading, drafting, proofreading your own work and seeking feedback, and then you start again. Because your research proposal, yes, it's a final document, but you're going to have many, many drafts to get it to where you need it to be. So, you know, just write. That's my advice. Just start writing, no matter what it is that, even if you think you're not ready with your fully organized ideas, that's how you get to that point, is by writing and drafting and seeking feedback. So productive researchers, what do? They make their writing a habit. So if anything from what we're talking about today, just try to get into right now at the proposal stage, try to get into those really, really good habits where you're writing often. Don't put it off, write those bad drafts and then improve them. And that'll help you improve not only the drafts, but of course your overall skills as well. Sabrina's saying write first or mind map first. Do them both at the same time. Your mind map is writing, but your mind maps are probably just dot points, but then you can expand on all of those dot points and then work out what the structure is from there. You know, anything that you write is not going to be wasted. It's all part of your thinking. And even if you write a whole, you know, couple of pages on it, on something you're thinking might be good, and then you decide, oh, that's not really the angle I want to take, you still realize that that's not the angle. So it hasn't been wasted. It's all part of the thinking. If the thinking stays in your head, you won't remember it all, and you won't be able to get feedback on it either. So with those drafts, yes, you're going to write them. The first drafts, you're the person reading them initially. So there's no pressure. It doesn't matter if, you know, the writing's not fantastic. You're going to proofread them and make them better and ready to be given to someone to get feedback. So my advice with your drafts when you're proofreading, and of course we want to proofread before we give to anybody else, you're going to print and read aloud. That way you'll also hear if there's a sentence that sounds a bit funny. If we just read on the screen, we're going to skip ahead. Our eyes skip ahead and we think, oh yeah, that's fine. So if you read aloud, you're going to hear probably, that sounds a bit strange, and that'll help you to figure out how to fix it. And of course, if you're printing, you have much better attention to detail. So when you're proofreading, you already potentially have a few ideas of your weaknesses, so you can focus on those. And as I said about your micro and your macro, you coherence and your cohesion. Divide your time up. It's really difficult to do both at once. So perhaps look at the big picture first. Okay, is everything flowing well? Is everything there that I need? Is the structure going well? Then you can go look at the micro, look at the cohesion of your paragraphs individually. Sabrina's just written in the chat, just worried if I go the wrong way and I'm not on the right track. But what if you're on the wrong track, you can realize that and get back on the right track. So I don't think it's wasted to go on the wrong track briefly. You know, I know I was the same. I had so many ideas, and I'm sure that you guys are the same. You have so many ideas on what you might be doing as for your research proposal. So you need to trial them all. You need to get them into writing and see if they're the right way. So writing and thinking go hand in hand. Doesn't mean you have to show your supervisor all of your thinking drafts, okay? You only send to your supervisor once you're pretty sure that, okay, this seems like I'm on the right track. And then you get the feedback and you can go from there. Okay, so remember we're having the pep talk today. So one of the really important things is we need to plan and take control. Don't let things drift. You know, as we said, research writing can be challenging, but you're the one with all the answers in the end, even if you don't know them right now. So plan, revise regularly. It's going to help to alleviate any anxiety and stress. If you would have a deadline already for your proposal. How much time have you got? What do you need to do to get there? And work out a plan of how many words you need to write or which sections you need to have by which time. And of course, develop relationships and seek feedback as often as you can. It's really hard to improve if you are just in your head and you're not talking or discussing with anybody. So, and that's how we construct our knowledge, through interactions with others, as well as, of course, reading. So read, think, write, ask for feedback, and plan how you're going to do all of those things into your busy schedule. Effective record keeping systems is a really important of that, of planning and taking control. Back up every single day. I lost a few bits and pieces here and there, but luckily it was only ever a couple of hours of work. I don't know how I lost things. I don't know. Things sometimes don't save. That happens. So if you've got backup in multiple places, you won't lose anything. Of course, write yourself notes all the time in your documents, just keep writing in your drafts. If you think of something and you think, oh, but I want to keep going on this thought, just write yourself a little note and come back later. Keep a notebook maybe of all of your thoughts and things you need to do. Use different fonts, colors in your drafts to know where you need to go back to check. Version control is a really good way, because try not to delete anything. You might end up coming back to something that you thought wasn't going to be useful. So you can use version control or dates, or just have a system that fits for you and that isn't too difficult. And if you start that now at the proposal stage, it's really going to set you up for when you start to analyze your data and write up your results and findings. So setting up a long Word document. Ask yourself right now, do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know how to format a long Word document? Because that's what you will need to have when you submit your final thesis. So my advice is do it now. Have all of your, everything that you submit to your supervisor, and even at this proposal stage, if you can have it in a long Word document that's formatted correctly with the pages, headings and subheadings set up correctly, page breaks, and all of those things, you can have that master document, and then you can have your other documents for your drafts and then put them into that master document. So, so do you know how to set up and format a long Word document? If you do, that's great. If you don't, you can utilize the resources that are on HiQ. Again, a lot of really good information there. Now, there's some video tutorials and there's some requirements in there, some guidelines as well. Please don't leave it until just before you're about to submit for your final seminar. Yeah, so I think getting into good habits now and understanding, because it can be fiddly, and there's all of the resources are there on HiQ. Unfortunately, the library, if you go to the library and say, hey, can you help me to do this? They will say, sorry, no. Go to HiQ and utilize the resources there. Okay, so another really important sort of an administration part of your degree. Okay, so now we're going to start getting really into your research proposal and understanding the purpose. So every document that you write, no matter where it is that you're up to in your candidature, I want you to always think about, well, what is this document demonstrating? What do I need to show to the reader? In the case of our proposal, you're showing that you have the knowledge and the capability to undertake a research degree. That's what they're looking for, all right? The audience that you're writing for your proposal. So you need to demonstrate that you've got a clear plan, that you're going to contribute to the current body of knowledge, that your project is original and it's manageable, that you're able to get and access the data, that it's an ethical and robust research design that's going to answer the questions, and that you understand the discourses and conventions in your research community. So there's a lot of things there, isn't there? But that's okay. You're going to write a well-structured and clear research proposal that does all of these things. All right, so your proposal, remember, it's the starting point for your development as a researcher and writer. So you're not meant to know everything at this point. Of course, it's a proposal and you're going to get feedback on it. But you still need to have a really clear idea at this stage about your research aims, your questions, and the research design. And then they will be refined as you go through your candidature. So if you can convince the reader at this proposal stage that your research is valuable and needed, anything that needs to be tweaked down the track with your aims and your questions and potentially your research design, then if the proposal is clear and the reader can see that, okay, this is some research that's needed, then the other aspects can be refined as you progress. But that's the key. The purpose of this proposal really is to convince the readers that this research is needed and therefore you should be able to continue with it as part of your degree. So, how are you going to do that? Well, the key is that you need to convince the reader that there is a research problem that needs to be addressed. If there's no problem, why would you be doing the research in the first place? So you need to make judgments about the previous research by saying, okay, this is what we already know, but this is what we don't know. And then based on what we don't know, how is your study exactly going to contribute to providing those insights? And also something that's really important in your proposal is the details and the justification of your research design. That's something that the panel or your supervisors or whoever it is that's looking at your research proposal, that's what they're really interested in, as well as the value of the research is, how are you going to find out the answers to your research questions? So really spend a lot of time on that research design as part of your proposal. We're going to look at that a bit more in a little while. But yes, the research problem is the key. Convince your readers that there is a problem and that you're the person to help us to find out some solutions towards that problem. So as always, with anything that you're writing and any documents that you're submitting, it's all about the reader. Alrighty, so even at your proposal stage, most likely your reader is part of your research community, but they're not an expert in your study, all right, which is why you need to be very clear and you need to be very explicit. Most likely as well, they're interested in your study, which is great. It's a great starting point to know that your readers are interested in what you're writing. You've got to maintain that interest by engaging and how do you make sure that you're engaging your reader as you write those drafts and you seek feedback so that you know that what you're writing is clear and being explained really well and you're leading the reader through and keeping their interest. So we need to aim to get a deep understanding of your research. That's what you want for your reader to really be reading through and going, okay, I can see where this is going. This sounds really interesting. And I can also see the value as well. You have to persuade them your research is significant and value. If you can't engage the reader, it's because you haven't been clear enough about why the research is important. So your communication has failed is probably a bit harsh, isn't it? So what if we say your communication is not as good as it could be? Again, I keep talking about getting feedback, but that's how you're going to get to this point where you are making sure your communication is clear and the value of your research is clear. I can't emphasize this enough. It's so important with your research proposal. What often happens is because you know that your research is important and you know it's valuable, you sometimes writers are making the assumption, well, everybody knows. Now, we can assume and we can understand where you're coming from and we can say, okay, I think I can see where this is going, but that's not enough. It needs to be explicit and clear with no doubt left. Don't let the reader try to put two and two together. You have to do it for them, especially in this proposal stage, which is high stakes, because you want to be able to continue on and do your research. So your proposal needs to be good enough so that you can progress through and do your research. But it doesn't have to be so perfect that you have every single answer at this stage because it's the proposal and you're going to get some really good feedback to improve. So as I said, your research purpose starts with the problem. If there's no problem, why are you doing your research in the first place? So I want you to write into the chat what is your, not so much what is your problem, but what is your ultimate goal? Are you contributing to solve the problem? Are you trying to find something new? Is it a theoretical gap? Are you going to help improve best practice? It might be something else. Which ones are you doing? You can write it in the chat now. Have a think about it. Are you evaluating the way something is already done? Are you going to come up with something completely new? Does anyone want to write in the chat right now? Maybe, maybe not. Oh, a new framework, contributing to solve a problem, a bit of everything. Okay, be careful with that. Make sure that it's very clear what the exact problem is. Improving best practice, excellent. Theoretical gap again, beautiful. Okay, this is a nice specific one. Trying to contribute to reducing traffic injury among child cyclists, nice. Scientific experiments, yes. Improving policy, identifying existing issues, great. Okay, good, good. So you can see how once we can articulate the problem and say, well, what is our insight going to be towards the problem? That's going to start us on getting everything else into line. So it all aligns with answering this research problem. So that's what I just said, noticing the links. Once we are really clear on what the problem is, then we can begin to say, okay, well, what's the background to the problem? How have we got to this problem? What's missing? Then we're going to have our clear research aim, which leads us to the significance. And once we know our aim and our value, then we can start to look at the gaps and develop our research questions. And then from there, our research methods. Now, that looks all very simple, doesn't it? But as we keep saying, it's iterative. Alrighty. So yes, there's a progression, but some things might happen before the other. You know, as you're looking at the background, that might help you to see what the gaps are. Once you've looked at your research aim, that's going to help you with the research questions. So yes, they all build on each other, but also it's all often happening at the same time. So that's why you need to have those drafts where you put down everything that you're thinking regarding each of those aspects. That's why you need the feedback. And that's why you need to leave yourself constantly notes so that if you come up with an idea towards one of those aspects, you can then go back and say, oh, I had that good idea. What was it? Someone's just asking in the chat if there'll be a recording of the presentation. Yes, it should be up later on this afternoon on Blackboard. All right, so we're just, as we said, everything's linked, and you need to tell the reader how everything links as well, as of course as part of your proposal. So the other really important aspect of your proposal is the research design. Yes, absolutely. The literature review and the research gap is really important, of course, but make sure that you spend time on the research methods and that you explain what you're planning on doing in a really clear way in your final proposal that you submit. That's something that the panel or your supervisors, whoever's looking at it, is really going to look at closely. Now, as I said before, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be a work in progress. But if you have something very clear initially, that gives them something really good to work with to then propose some other strategies or some other things that you may not have thought about. So also don't forget about your data analysis. Okay, so it's all very great to say, oh, this is how I'm going to collect the data, but also be very clear on how you're going to analyze the data as well. I would strongly recommend that, again, find some books related to the research methods you're looking at. And of course, when you're doing your literature review, what are previous researchers, what have they been doing to collect and analyze their data, and then use that as part of your justification. So have a good research design, but you also need to justify it as well. Research ethics, that's also one of the purposes of your research proposal. It will certainly be the basis for your ethics application. The Office for Research Ethics and Integrity are great. It's common for you to submit your ethics and then for them to come back wanting more information. Don't be worried or upset about that. It's completely normal. Usually it means you haven't provided enough detail for them because, again, they're not experts in your study, okay? No assumptions. They need to know everything that's in your mind. So take their feedback in a really positive way because they want you to gain approval, and it's going to help with all of your thinking and your whole research design as well. All right, so a lot of things going on as far as the purposes of your research proposal. But some good news is once you do all these things and you have this beautiful proposal ready to submit, it's going to demonstrate your critical thinking and it's going to fulfill all of those purposes. And, you know, that's what we're after, and that's what they're looking for, to demonstrate your critical thinking and to really show the value of your research. So don't forget, of course, that your research field and faculty may need extra things that I haven't discussed here in the purposes section. The way you write and present your proposal will be different depending on your faculty as well. So keep that in mind and use all the resources available on HiQ and also within your faculty to make sure that you fulfill all of the purposes that you need. All right, so now we're going to look at some strategies to persuade and inform the reader about the value of your research. Remember, that's what one of the main things that we're demonstrating in this proposal, because we want to go ahead and undertake this research. So let's have a look at how everything links together. So understanding the purposes, yep, that's what we just looked at. Implement effective writing strategies, that's what we're going to look at now. And those strategies are going to help you to think and write critically so you fulfill the purposes of your proposal. So it's like a never-ending circle with everything linked together. So first strategy, don't wait, start writing. Remember, thinking and writing go together. Those drafts are the key. As you read back your drafts, it'll help your thinking and help you to then improve those drafts. Now, there's nothing that says you have to start with the very first sentence that you're intending on having in your research proposal. Start anywhere, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all where you start, just start writing. You know, even if it's just dot points initially. So, for example, what are your thoughts about the literature that you're reading? Think about those as you're reading through. So read and write all at the same time is a really good strategy. So as you're reading, have a pen, annotate the articles, and even write into some documents. Another thing you can do is start defining your research topic. Maybe there's some key terms that you know will need to be included. So an activity that you can do right now is just jot down some of the key terms that you know that you'll need to define. And those key terms are going to keep coming up, aren't they, as you're reading? So underneath where you wrote about your research problem and the benefits, now you can write down some key terms. Everyone will always have, sorry for the dogs barking. Okay, so hopefully you've thought of some key terms. Let's move on. Okay, so another thing that you can be doing is planning your roadmap. So as part of your drafting, have a think about how many words you need to write for each section. If you're writing a confirmation, you might have chapters. So let's say your document needs to be 3,000 words. So do you think you're going to have 3 chapters or sections that are 1,000 words each? Maybe, but probably not exactly the same. What if it's 10,000 words, perhaps potentially for a confirmation document? Again, is it 3,300 words for each one? Are they exactly the same lengths? They wouldn't be, but you can pose those questions to yourself. What if you're writing a stage 2 proposal and you can only write 1,000 words? So again, it's all scalable. But most likely you are going to have 3 main parts to your research proposal: an introduction, a lit review, and the research design or research methods. Now, the introduction is likely to be the shortest section. The lit review potentially might be the longest one, but perhaps the lit review and research design, because they're both so important, maybe they're going to be around the same length. So if you have an idea of how many words that you need, that's going to really help with your planning. So also plan how you're with your each milestone, how much time do you need, how much time do you have? Schedule some planning time as well. That's a really, you only need probably about half an hour every few months or so just to check that you're on track. And don't forget that your proposal initially as well is to show that you can meet your targets and meet your deadlines as well. So planning is a really important part of your writing. So yes, if you don't sort of have an idea of how many words, you're probably going to go off track a little bit, you know. So just ask your supervisor what their thoughts are. Obviously, you can change plans when you need to, but it's good to have a starting point. So someone's asked in the chat, if we're doing thesis by publication, should the methods be set out per publication or from a broader perspective? So each publication would need its own methods, but perhaps in those publications, you might be saying that this is part of a broader research project. But you would still, in your final thesis, you would still have a methods section or chapter, which talks about the overall research design. And then within that, what you did for each of your papers. They might be different parts of the study that are then all sort of put together. Maybe one part informs the other. So it's going to be different for everybody. But within each publication, yes, you would have the specific methods for that aspect of the research, but you could definitely be saying in there that it's part of an overall research design and broadly explain that if it fits. So also remember that, yes, this isn't fiction, of course, but it's still your research story. So you need a beginning and a middle and an end, even in a proposal. You don't actually have your final ending in your proposal, but you have an end to your document, of course. So your beginning is your introduction. Here's this problem. The middle is establishing the significance, the gaps, saying how you're going to investigate the problem. And then the end would be explaining again the problem and how you're going to solve. So every document needs to come full circle. You have all your characters, and as we said, there's a problem. This is evidence to prove a problem, and you're going to say how you're going to investigate and then solve the problem as well. Someone's asked if there's a research design guide for the thesis by publication, and yes, it is. It's on HiQ in the your candidature section of the research student pages. So another activity that you can do right now is have a look at these potential subheadings, remembering that yours may not be exactly like these. They may not be in this order as well. But starting with these, have a think about which one of these do you know you definitely need? And then also, what do you think, what other subheadings might you need for your specific research proposal? You could have a theoretical framework that you need to explain in a little bit of detail. So perhaps you're going to have a subheading that says theoretical framework. Maybe you already have done some experiments that you want to let the readers know in your proposal. So you might need something, a subheading around that. So have a think right now, which subheadings are you going to need? Don't worry too much as you're drafting these. Don't worry too much about the order of them at this exact minute, because we just want to start writing. And then once we've started writing under some of these subheadings, we'll start to be able to see, when we're looking at the big picture, how the flow is going. Are we structuring the way that we need to? That makes sense, of course, to the reader. We're scaffolding all the way through. We're building on everything in each section. Okay, so kind of makes sense that the background to the problem might be one of the first things you talk about. But potentially you might be wanting to talk about the research aims initially. This is something you'll discuss with your supervisor. And again, you're going to get feedback on as well. But if we can just draft a few potential subheadings, that's going to help you to get started. So while you're writing those subheadings, another way to figure it out as well, if you're sort of like, not exactly sure of my subheadings, you can go back to some basics and ask yourself some of these questions. What is my research about? Have I identified it clearly? What am I trying to achieve? That links with your aims, doesn't it? Why is this research worth doing? This is about your significance. But if we pose as questions rather than subheadings, sometimes that can help us to at least get started. Now, the one about what is the underpinning question my research will investigate, that could potentially also be your aim. Maybe it's looking at your actual research question. Your research questions are usually one of the, you can pose them, but it's one of the last things in your proposal that you'll actually get worded exactly the way that you want it. So don't worry too much if you feel like, this question isn't exactly where I want it yet. Again, you're going to get feedback on that, but you need a starting point with anything, don't you? How will my research help to answer this research question? So that's more looking at your research design and making sure it links. And it's also looking at your contribution. So you can see how everything is tied together. And that's one of the things that makes writing a research proposal sometimes difficult, because you have a lot of things you want to say, you have limited words, and also which is the most important thing to say first. So once you start writing, those questions about, well, what goes first, what comes after, will start to make sense for you. So just write, think of these questions, draft your subheadings, and then you can consider, okay, well, what's the logical structure here? Now that I have, 3, 4, 5 pages written, what makes the most sense for my structure? Now, with all of those questions, those subheadings, your roadmap, you need to be flexible. Everything's going to change the more you get feedback, and that's okay. Nothing is wasted. All of that thinking and writing is useful to get you to this place where you can get the feedback and improve further. Write good notes. If you make a decision about a subheading, don't agonize. That's my subheading. And then later on, you can change it, okay? Don't sort of worry too much until you start to get that feedback, and then you can make another decision based on the feedback or better ideas that you come up with. Plan A might be something, and then plan B will be better, plan C will be better again. Don't forget, everything's going to take longer than you thought as well, so anticipate that into your planning. So as always, get into the reader's shoes if you can. I know that it's difficult. Think about the reader-writer dialogue, okay? It is a discussion between the two of you, but it's in writing. They're not sitting next to you. That's why you have to be so clear and explicit at all times. Imagine who your audience is. As we said, they're experts in your field, they're interested in your field, but they're not experts in your study. Everything has to be really clear. If the feedback is that it's not clear what you're saying, make it clear. Don't get cross, okay, and say, well, I think it's clear. If your feedback is that it's not clear, you have to go with that. Just reword. See if you can make it better. Maybe you need to add a sentence. Maybe you need to give an example. Always keep the reader in the loop. Explain the structure of the document as early as you can. And don't make the reader wait for your research aims and the significance. Tell them very early on what it is, and then you expand as you go through your document. Now, as I said, a lot of these things that we're talking about here is looking at the strategies and looking at the important parts of your research proposal. The writing circle, we're going to look at examples of all of these things, okay? So the key is, as we keep saying, your research problem. So not only an explicit and clear research problem, we also need to persuade the reader that it's urgent, that it's something that's challenging, which is why we need your study. There's negative impacts, it needs to be resolved, and your research is going to help us to do that. So your passion for your study, you need to funnel that into persuading the reader that this problem is really important for certain stakeholders, and so it's going to be valuable for you to continue with this research. So as far as your problem goes, don't make it too big, okay? You know, you're one person doing this degree with a limited time, okay? So investigate one problem that's manageable. So this is all part of your critical thinking, of course, using the literature. So be very clear, who is the problem affecting? What do we already know? Are there debates about this problem and you're going to help clear those up? What happens if we don't resolve this problem? And of course, who's benefiting? So the research gap, of course, very, very important. Don't wait till the end of your literature review section to say that there's a gap. It should be part of the beginning. We need to inform and persuade and be very clear about the contribution your study will make and who will benefit. So as well, why do we care about these gaps? Remember, we've got this problem. Yeah, who cares? That's your so what. So what that there's this problem? Well, your so what is the value of your research. We need to be really clear on that. Remember the example at the beginning. We had a research problem of what kind of writing support is going to help HDRs improve their skills and become confident writers. Okay, fair enough. But why do we care about if HDRs are confident writers? So what? Well, it's going to help mental health and well-being of HDRs. Seems important. It's going to help HDRs to have on-time completions. It's going to help if they're confident writers using effective strategies, the thesis quality is going to be good. Okay, starting to see why we should care, but still, who cares? Who cares if the thesis is good quality? Who cares about on-time completions? Well, if we have researchers who are experienced and effective writers that can disseminate their research in a clear way, it's going to improve our body of knowledge. The more knowledge we have, the more problems we can solve. We're going to have a better society and life's going to be better for the stakeholders that researchers are investigating for. So, you know, probably not the best example, but it just gives you an idea of your so what, okay? You need to be talking about that the whole way through. Why do we care about this problem? What exactly is it that's going to be the benefit of your research? So ask yourself right now, why is my research worth doing? Okay, that links, doesn't it, to the benefits that we thought about before. It links to the stakeholders, who's going to benefit and how. You need to be clear on this all the way through your document. So with your literature review, we're not going to spend much time on this today, but don't just read, write as well. Notice how your researchers in your field are writing, not just the content. What kind of language do they use? Read widely, ask questions, think about their methods. How are the results relevant to you and what's missing? Now, this is a good good resource here, Connected Papers. You can go in and have a look at that. It's going to help you with your concept mapping and finding literature relevant to your problem. You can go in and have a look at that. So of course, as we keep saying, there's a common thread through your whole document. We've been talking a little bit about the separate sections or chapters, but every single section and chapter needs to have this common thread, which is your research problem, your gaps, and your significance. Keep reminding the reader all the way through, why do we need your research? And this is really part of your big picture. Keep the answers to all those main questions clear in your mind. Maybe pop them up on somewhere in your house so that they're at the forefront of your mind at all times, because you want to tell the reader about these in every single section. So another really good strategy regarding your writing is the words that you're using are so important. Words have power. You can see in those examples there that different words have a different meaning. Some are strong, some are neutral, some are weak. So I really also recommend the Manchester Academic Phrase Bank, another really good strategy for you for your phrases, but think about the words as well. Don't just say an issue was raised in the literature. What kind of issue? A significant one? Good word. Current events have negatively influenced policy. It's giving us more of an insight into what your thoughts and assumptions are regarding what you're saying, and it's much better for the reader to know what your meaning is if you use really good describing vocabulary. And of course, seek feedback regularly. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's essential to the writing process. It develops your evaluative judgment, so your ability to judge the quality of your work and what you need to improve. So ask yourself now, other than your supervisor, who could you seek feedback from? It's really important. Of course, your supervisors, we need feedback from them, but your initial drafts, you're probably better off to get some feedback from other people while you get your thoughts clear and making sure that the meaning is clear as well. You can't just rely on your supervisor for feedback all the way through. So ask yourself now, who else could you seek feedback from? All right, so we are going to go now into our peer discussion, which means we're going to pop into our breakout rooms. Now, peer discussion, we get a lot of feedback that students love it. Some students not as much, but what I want to think about, if you're one of the people that don't overly like the peer discussion, I want you to think about why we do it. And it's because it increases your understanding, improves your critical thinking, it makes you more aware of your strengths and weaknesses. And of course, we construct knowledge through interactions with others. So please, look at this as a beneficial activity that you're going to gain from. So we're going to pop into our breakout rooms now for about 10 minutes. Don't forget you have to accept the pop-up. And these are our questions that we're going to discuss. So introduce yourself quickly. We're going to talk about the research problem, your research problem. So remember the questions at the beginning to start you thinking. If you can articulate in a couple of sentences your research problem and the benefits, that's going to help you to get those clear in your mind. So discuss those with your peers. I've got down there around 15 minutes. We're probably going to go a little bit less than that, around 10 minutes. So I'm going to pop you into your breakout rooms now. Please accept the pop-up and go in. I'm sure you'll benefit from the peer discussion and meeting some of your peers. Okay. So we've got, let's see. All right, I'm going to pop you in now to your breakout rooms. Please accept the pop-up and I'll see you again shortly. So we're going to look now at our final section, thinking and writing critically. But what I want you to think about is you just engaged in critical thinking. Okay, so how do we improve our critical thinking? By discussing with our peers and, of course, with our supervisors. So we improve our critical thinking through critical discussions and, of course, planning, writing those drafts, keeping on track, being open-minded, being active learners, and reflecting on how we can achieve better outcomes as we go through our candidature. So let's have a little bit more of a look at critical thinking. This is a really interesting website. You can see it there. It's just called criticalthinking.org. And this guy, Dr. Richard Pauls, critical thinking is his area of expertise. And I've put this in here for two things. As you're reading through, there's a couple of things that I want to really highlight. Is that firstly, critical thinking is complex. It's very hard to define. And the second really important aspect, which is touched on here in that last paragraph, is the idea of content knowledge being so important. So, you know, when we're talking about you reading widely and having a really deep understanding of your research field and your research topic, that enables you to really get into that deep critical thinking. And the third really important thing that I think you can get from this little excerpt as well is the idea of the value of critical discussion. You know, really try to get in deep with your supervisors and try to have as many discussions as you can around where you're going, what you're doing, and your thoughts, and where you think the problem is, and the gaps and the significance. You know, yes, you're going to send them your drafts, of course, but also try to have opportunities with your supervisors to discuss, you know, set up a meeting and come in and say, hey, can I talk about what I'm thinking? And you can give me some feedback on that, and we can really discuss, and that's going to help with your critical thinking as well. I think the example there about chess is really good as well. You know, yes, you need to memorize and be aware of the content and have knowledge of it, but then we also want to go deeper and really think through the next part as well, you know, forward thinking. So how do we demonstrate our critical thinking? By informing the reader in our documents, and then informing when we're talking to someone, and then of course persuading through our written arguments. You know, so don't just describe the literature. You're going to compare it, contrast it, evaluate it, and make those explicit judgments. You're allowed to have opinions, but we need to then underpin those opinions with evidence as well. And of course, by demonstrating the value of your research. So another way to look at critical thinking is surface learning versus deep learning. Now, of course, we all need that aspect of the surface learning, which is recalling and memorizing and describing, but we need to go deeper with our questioning and looking at the cause and effect and consequences. So descriptive is where we say something happened, and then we use our critical thinking by saying, okay, something happened and these were the consequences. Descriptive is where we say, well, there's two options, and then the critical is looking, okay, well, which option is the best based on evidence. Looking at variables, there's a number of variables that are important, and then going again deeper, important in what way and for who. So when you're thinking and you're writing your drafts, ask yourself, okay, am I being descriptive, or am I also using my deep learning and being critical and really going deeper? And of course, we show our critical thinking by finding our voice, being confident in the work we've done, being very clear, demonstrating your knowledge and understanding, using evidence to underpin that understanding and to state your position. And as we said, words have power. Before, use them to convey your voice. Yes, of course, you need your sources, but you're also allowed to have your own voice too. And just while I think of it, if you haven't put your student ID, into the chat, could you please do so and we can record your attendance? I just realized I needed to mention that. All right, so when we're thinking about critical thinking, what kind of challenges and barriers might we come across? And one of them is that idea of lack of confidence. So remember, this was a pep talk as well as the looking at the strategies where be confident, you're going to put in that hard work. You're going to get to that deep learning. And so you can be confident. If there's things you don't know or skills you don't quite have developed where you want, find it out, read, think, write, ask questions, reflect, open your mind to other perspectives by having those great critical discussions with your supervisor. Be an active learner, not a passive learner. You can definitely overcome any challenges or barriers as you're going through your candidature. So of course, your literature review, that's going to demonstrate your critical thinking, what you leave out, what you put in, being able to explain why you've left something out, deciding on the structure, the best way to structure your proposal and your lit review as well, making sure you include any seminal researchers, and then using the evidence to underpin your assumptions and your knowledge and interpretations, and explaining all the connections, leading the reader through. So all of those things are demonstrating your critical thinking. Another thing to think about is your philosophical worldview. So this is a very basic breakdown. You would definitely need to read more to be able to write about this philosophical worldview, but have a think about it. If you want to write in your chat now what your worldview is. So for me, I am a constructivist. However, I can also see the value in quantitative research, in surveys and experiments, of course, as well. So have a think about, because whichever your worldview is, that is, and your assumptions of how we learn and what knowledge is, that's going to then inform your research methods, of course, and your research design. So I'm going to put into the chat that I am a constructivist, which means that my overwhelming belief is that we need to gain understanding through knowing people's lived experiences. But of course, I can see that there's many other worldviews that will also, of course, add to our knowledge. Yep, pragmatism, excellent. Yep, all right, good. So if you're not sure, and look, maybe your supervisor's not asking you to put this into your research proposal, but maybe they are. But it's still good to have an understanding of where you think knowledge comes from. So that is going to demonstrate your critical thinking, because your beliefs will then, of course, influence your methodology and the research methods, how you're going to collect and analyze the data. So you can ask yourself right now, in your field, how do researchers normally position themselves? How does your worldview link to your research problem? Do they match? I hope so. You need to make them match somehow, but maybe you're doing something new in your field. If you are, how is it going to work? So for example, for me, in my PhD research, I was looking at international students, undergrads, and how their experiences were in terms of academic literacy, and generally looking at that sort of research, it was always qualitative, but I added in some quantitative as well to help inform my qualitative methodology. So that was something new. And then of course I had to explain why it was new and why it would be valuable to add that quantitative aspect into my study. So of course, we're talking about critical thinking. Your research design is going to demonstrate that as well. So making sure you can answer the fact that it's obtainable for you to collect that sort of data. And of course, how are you going to analyze the data? Can you gain access to what you need to collect the data? What research skills might you need to improve? And of course, as always, we need to link to the problem, the aims, and the questions. They all need to be linked together, and you need to be explicit and explain to the reader how they link. Don't assume that they're going to know. You need to tell them. And of course, the ethics as well is something that demonstrates your critical thinking of being able to put yourself in the shoes of your participants. So a tip as well with your research methods is thinking about how you're going to ultimately present your findings and your discussion as well. Have some ideas around that too. Because you will need to justify your decisions. This is part of your research proposal. Of course, there's going to be a lot of questions. Well, why this topic? Well, that's because there's a research problem, right? You're going to be very explicit about that. This topic is to answer a research problem. Why did you review this literature and not something else? You'll need to say in your proposal why you focused on a specific aspect of the literature. Why are you using these participants and not somebody else? Again, justify why you're using the participants or the research methods. All of this is part of your critical thinking and why we need that tight link between the problem, the aims, and the methods, of course. Now, as I keep saying, your proposal is really important document, but you're not expected to know everything. If you can inform and persuade and have a very clear idea of where you're going, you can then gain some constructive feedback to then improve further. And we always come back around to the feedback. You need to seek feedback widely, and so that's going to help improve your feedback literacy. What does that mean? It means that you're part of a feedback process, which is a two-way dialogue between you and the person you're asking feedback for. Ask specific questions about what you want feedback on. If you get the feedback and you don't really understand what they mean, ask for clarification. If you disagree with the feedback, that's okay, and explain to them why. And then you're going to have that effective critical discussion and progress further. Now, it's not fun when we don't receive the feedback we're expecting, when it feels like it's a little bit negative. That's completely normal to feel bad, but it's all to try to make your document and you as a researcher better. So try not to get upset, just breathe. Maybe don't respond straight away. Maybe respond to the easy feedback first, and then the harder stuff that's a bit confronting you can look at a little bit later, but certainly don't take it personally. It's all to try to make your document and your research better. All right, so we're nearly at the end. Just some final tips and this final pep talk where I really just want you to feel confident, to be motivated and think, you know, I can do this. I'm going to write a great research proposal and I'm really going to enjoy and be passionate about my research and my study. One of the really important things is to look after your physical and your mental health. You know, yes, you're going to have to spend a lot of time, but, you know, you're allowed to still live your life. So refresh yourself, you know, get your friends and family on board so that they can be your cheerleaders and they can, you know, say, be there for you when you have your spare time. If you're struggling, tell your supervisors, they're there to help you. Seek support wherever you can. Don't forget, don't compare yourself to others. We never know what other people's situations are. So you are you, and that's okay. Yes, sometimes we can feel overwhelmed with everything we have to do, which is why our planning is really important, and also, of course, asking for help. So you can achieve your goals by making writing a habit. It's not optional to do later on. Do it now as part of your thinking. Get into really good habits. Schedule those regular short writing sessions into your calendar. Make sure you proofread and then seek feedback. Sometimes you know that you're going to have a really busy period. That's okay. and any other obstacles that might be towards writing, put your plans into place to overcome them. We have a writing workshop on writer's block. You'll be able to find that on HiQ. That's a good one to help you with those obstacles. And try, if you can, to write every day. It sounds like, how could I do that? You can, even if it's 20 minutes, you can find 20 minutes and just a few sentences. You won't regret it. In the end, the regret will be, oh my gosh, I wish I had spent more time writing. Okay. But you can definitely do it if you are, have really good plans in place. And, sometimes our plans don't quite come out as we wanted, and that's okay. Tomorrow's another day. So you are going to make a writing plan right now. Just jot down, where are you going to have your little writing time today or tomorrow or on the weekend? That's my challenge to you. Where will you be? Will you be in your office, at uni? Will you go to the library? Will you go to the coffee shop? Will you be at home? Will you be out in the sun, in the park? Whatever it is. Are you going to write straight in your laptop? Are you going to write in your notebook? Then figure out when. I want you to put, for the next week, 3 writing sessions in your diary now. Try for 25 minutes. If you can do more, great. So as I said, first one is today or tomorrow, another one on the weekend. If not the weekend, then Monday. I don't know if you give yourself the weekends off. Now, of course, you've got a whole lot of other commitments. I know that. So when you're looking at your calendar, put those commitments in first and then see where your writing time is going to come from. Now, writing's not reading. Writing is not proofreading. Writing is not anything else except actually writing fresh, new sentences. It doesn't matter if they're dot points. It doesn't matter if they're not perfect. This is your drafts. So once you've got your where and your when, what are you going to write? So maybe go back to your subheadings or those questions that we had a little bit earlier and choose one of those. Maybe you can flesh out your research problem, maybe some of the background. Maybe you like to start thinking about writing about what you're going to do for your research methods. Whatever it is, that's fine. But if you can set up a writing plan where you know your where, your when, and your what, it's going to mean as soon as you sit down at that dedicated time, you can go for it and just write and write. Excellent. Thanks, Antoinette. Yep, Lawrence, he's on the balcony. Excellent. Oh, good. Love it. Perfect. All right, so be confident, persevere, use your critical thinking, improve your writing through those drafts and the feedback, manage your time, think and write, they go together, and keep writing and thinking until you've got those answers. Now, just before we finish up, let's revisit the activities we looked at today. Articulate a clear research problem, define key terms, draft some subheadings, set yourself your schedule, and ask yourself, do you know how to set up a long document? If not, go to that HiQ information. Who are you going to seek feedback from other than your supervisor? Why do we need your research? That's your value. What's your worldview and how does that connect to your problem and your methods? And always be thinking, am I surface learning or am I deep learning? Even when you're reading, you can be deep learning by asking questions about what you're reading and what are your assumptions? What did you learn from what you have read? So the takeaways for today, I know I've said this so many times, the value of your research is so important. It needs to be clear through the whole document. Know your audience, know the purpose of your document, and lead the reader through. We don't want the reader working hard. We want them going, I see, oh, I see, that seems very interesting. I can't wait to find out more. You're going to take control of the writing process with your draft writing time and seeking feedback. And of course, you're going to utilize all the resources here at GRED, on HiQ, through your faculty, through Blackboard. everything you can find. So just before we get to our Q&A section, I would love it if you could please give us some feedback on today's session. Here's the link. If you just click on that link, it will take you straight to a very short survey. It's quick, it's anonymous. It will help to make this session even better. We do have a look at the feedback and we take it into consideration with everything we do. So please, if you could click on that link right now, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. Then we've got a couple of last bits and pieces and our Q&A. So if you could just take 2 minutes to fill it out. Done. Thank you. All right, while you are still filling it out, in case you missed at the start, we didn't have any examples really today of research proposals. It was all about what's the purpose and the strategies. So we do have a writing circle coming up on this topic. So please come along to that. We'll have some exemplars for you to look at, and you'll be able to have a look at your own writing. So that's on the 23rd of September. I'll put the link to register in the chat there. We've also got some upcoming sessions. There's a Writers Wellbeing Lounge next Thursday. There's an academic vocabulary workshop. There is, of course, on the 8th of September, our QUT Research Student Showcase. I'm going to give you the link for that in a moment. So that is our 3MT and our Visualize Your Thesis finalists. It would be excellent for you to come and have a look at those. That will be very interesting. The link there for all of our upcoming sessions. And we've also got a peer HDR writing peer feedback session coming up as well. So I'll give you the information for those in a moment. Here's the showcase. I really recommend that you come to that. You just register. It's free, of course. You register via Eventbrite. So as we said, it's on the 8th of September. It will be great. And I really recommend that you come and see the finalists for 2021. So our HDR writing peer feedback sessions, remember I said to you, well, who are you going to get feedback from? If you weren't able to think of somebody, potentially you can come to one of these because you will get some really good benefits and get some feedback on your in-progress drafts, and it will help with your evaluative judgment, your critical thinking, of course. So really good idea to come to those if you can. Register on HiQ. We've got the Wellbeing Lounge, as I said, where you do 25-minute sprints. You connect with your peers and you can reflect on your writing. So you could schedule one of those as part of your writing plan. And everything you need to know is on Blackboard, HiQ, the HDR Matters email that comes to you. So no reason to not be informed on everything that's out there to help you. Okay, so anybody have any questions, please feel free to either write in the chat or you can unmute your microphone and put your camera on and talk to me so I know you're out there. Any questions? Happy to answer. Nobody's brave. Maybe you don't have any questions. Yep, understand if you have to go. All good. Thank you for coming, by the way. All right, I can see some of you are still there. Come on, you must have a question.
Hey, Carrie. My name is Zhao, and I would like to raise a question. First, I would like to say your presentation is really helpful, although I missed the first part. Yeah. So
That's okay.
I would like to ask that is 9 to 5 long enough? Work during 9 to 5, 5 days a week, is that enough for a PhD student?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Thank you. I would say yes, because what you're doing is you're treating your degree as your job, which is great, which is what it was when you would have been an undergrad as well. Being at university is your job. It's what you do. So I would say if you utilize that time wisely, then yes, I think it would be, because at the end of, if you're doing 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, that means you've got the weekends to unwind and be with your friends and your family and regenerate your mind and your body, which is what we need to do. Look, everyone's going to be different, but if you're utilizing that time in a really well structured way, then I would say trial it, work hard and see how you go. If you're meeting your milestones and your drafts and your documents are where you need to be, then I think that that sounds like a pretty good strategy to me.
Thank you. The reason I raised this question because somebody told me while they're doing PhD in America or Europe, they do much longer hours, and this is very common if you want to find getting into academia in the future in somewhere else out, not only in Australia. So I'm kind of worried about this.
Yeah, I do. I know, and lots of people say that. I know here in Australia as well. I think I think it depends because everybody's different. Everybody's study is different. You can only go with what you're doing, and if you're 9 to 5 and fully working that entire time and utilizing that time to do the things that you need to do, that's not to say that sometimes you might have to do a few hours over the weekend, or you might have a couple of times when you need to do something at night, but you need to have a break. No one can sustain 12 hours a day 7 days a week and keep their mental health and their physical health where it needs to be. And then if you're working those hours, then you're probably not working to the high capacity that you need to. So I don't think it's black and white, but I feel like if you trial that and see how you go and make sure that each day is really structured and you achieve the things that you've set out to achieve, then that might work quite well for you. That downtime is important. So try not to be too worried. And yeah, just see how you go. And that's not to say that sometimes you won't have to do a little bit of extra work, but I think most of the time that could be a pretty good strategy. At least to have one full day off a week is something that I would definitely try for. Thanks for your question. Joe, you've got a question?
Hi, yeah, I was wondering for the research proposal, I'm working on my stage 2 PhD milestone at the moment. I was wondering if you had any suggestions for formatting the methods section. So I'm pretty familiar with what a literature review looks like in terms of this, paragraphs of similar lengths and a sort of narrative style. But for the methods, that might be a bit dry or not engaging for a non-expert reader, I suppose. I was wondering if you'd come across any sort of different ways to present the methods in a more interesting way.
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. What kind of research are you doing? What are you qualitative? Are you quantitative?
Quantitative sort of modelling, a bit of expert elicitation, and some spatial and statistical analysis.
Yep. Okay. So I think the main important part of your methods is the clarity. So for someone to really be able to understand where your step by step is going. So it's, as you say, with the lit review, it's sort of the same way you're scaffolding through. And you know, I know what you're saying, it sort of may not be as narrative or as interesting. That's just the nature of the methods section, but it's just so important to be clear. I think that if you introduce the section really well, that could be where your style could be, you know, you can put that in there by sort of with your introduction to say, you know, why you're doing it this way and what the overall design might be, and then just progressing through each of the steps and just explaining why you're doing this way and how it fits into your field, how it might be different to your field. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be more technical, isn't it? There's no way around that. I think that another way you can make it a little bit more interesting as well is with the technical things to try to define those so that maybe somebody who is a little bit outside of your field may have more of an idea of what it is. But I think realistically in the methodology, it's the most important thing is to very clearly step out exactly what you're going to do and justify it rather than worrying as much about it being a story as such, you know, because that's something that they're going to be really looking at, isn't it, in your stage 2 document and giving you feedback on. I think as long as it flows well and it scaffolds and leads the reader through, that will be enough to keep the reader engaged and interested, especially if it's something that they're not particularly, you know, have knowledge of. That's definitely a way to keep them engaged. And that's the main thing that you want to do. You want to keep them engaged and you want to persuade them that this is a really good way to investigate your problem. Probably another way is to keep on reminding the reader about your research aims and how that design will link with your aims. That's another way to keep them engaged as well, so that they're reading along and going, okay, well, I can see those connections. Does that make sense or help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right. Oh, someone has asked in the chat, is there information on linking the research proposal to the thesis write-up? That's an interesting one. I think that they're not always going to link up because what you write in your proposal is often not exactly what you end up doing. However, generally that introduction and, well, all the sections really, the introduction, the lit review and the methods, they're going to be the basis for that final document. Yes, there's going to be some changes. Yes, there's going to be a lot more added, but I think that the main link there is going to be that proposal, keep it there, obviously, once you start analyzing the data and also, collecting the data in the first place, and use that proposal as your template, let's say. And it'll be really interesting too. What you'll find is that you'll go back into that document and you will have already learnt so much and you have received some good feedback that you'll see things and you'll say, oh, I can make that better now. I can see that was okay, but I can make it better now. So use your proposal really as your basis for your writing up, knowing that there might be some things you may need to remove, but there will definitely be a lot of things you'll need to add. But that's okay. You know, so basically your proposal is going to be the basis for your writing up with a whole lot more added in and some adjustments made. Certainly, I know when I was looking back at my confirmation document, I was thinking, oh, gee, what was I actually thinking here? That's really not as clear as it should be. Or I often took a different angle, you know, so I was rewriting things and saying, okay, I've still got these basics here, but want to take a slightly different angle, or I want to explain it in a better way. So I think that would be the main link there. I hope that answers your question. All right. Has anyone else got a question? If no, we might.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I just have a question regarding stage 2 also. Like, can we state the research problems through like clarifying the gaps that I have found on the literature, and then I can propose the study aims and how it could like overcome the challenges I have found in the literature?
Yeah, absolutely. So remember, the problem and the gaps they're linked, but they're also two different things. So there's a research problem, there's something we don't know enough about. And part of that problem is that there's a gap in the research. That's why we don't know enough about that problem. So you've got sort of two things happening at once there. And then your research aims, of course, will be to help to contribute to solving the problem and contributing to addressing the research gap. So, you know, if you can separate the two, but understand that they're linked, and this is why research writing is challenging, because there's so many moving parts happening all at the one time. So as you're reading through the literature, yes, you're going to be coming across where the gaps are in our knowledge, and you'll be able to clarify and explain why these gaps are a problem, because there's something we don't know, right? And therefore, by not knowing it, we're not using best practices, or we need more of a theoretical framework, or we can do something better or make better outcomes. So they're linked, but they're also two separate things, the gaps in the knowledge and the actual problem. The problem is about your stakeholders. So what you said just then about how you're going to go about is exactly right. You're looking at the problem and the gaps, and then from that is your research aims. I hope that makes sense. It's that because they overlap so much, that's what can make it quite challenging. And that's why we need to be clear about those two things. And then, of course, you've got the significance or the value of your research is you're contributing to to fill the research gap, and you're also contributing to helping to solve this problem.
Thanks
Can
so
I
much,
ask a quick
that's really
question?
helpful.
Okay, yep, sure.
Sorry, I hope I'm not going to take too much time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to find out, you know, when you said the problem and the gap, like how do we make it sound as if we have not come to a conclusion that this is the problem, because we are researching, so we're not sounding so biased, or is as if like I have done the research, I've come to a conclusion, this is what's going to happen and that is the problem, without sounding that way? Because I remember my supervisor was saying that we cannot come to a conclusion because the whole idea of the research is to research if there is a problem, but still there is a problem. You get what I mean? Like, how do we express that?
Yeah, well, by just being explicit and saying, here's a problem, and if we get more knowledge through my research, we'll be able to come up with some solutions or insight into helping this problem. So in your proposal stage, you're not saying what those solutions are, all right?
Yeah, but how do we come to a conclusion that there is a problem?
By just saying by being explicit about what the problem is. So for example, the example that I had about research writers and HDRs often not feeling confident. So that's just the problem. They sometimes don't feel confident. Sometimes they need to improve their writing strategies, and they're just not sure how to write in a way that's clear and explicit and structured. And that way, so that's purely the problem. So we're posing the questions. So in that proposal, I'm not saying, oh, well, one strategy would be to do A, another strategy would be to do something else. So you're not, and if you already know what some of the solutions are, you can have them written down somewhere else. You're just not putting them into that document. The proposal is continually posing the problem and saying, why is it a problem? Who is it a problem for? What are the likely outcomes? If we can go into this and do this research, we should be able to gain more insight to improve the problem. You're not actually saying at that stage what those things are going to be. You're alluding to them and you're saying, you know, by coming up with some solutions, we're going to have better patient outcomes or whatever it might be. I can see what you're saying, but I think you're overthinking it. By just saying, yes, I know, which is good.
Sorry, I was, because when you said that, the lack of confidence in the PhD students, but saying that, they have lack of confidence, so that is based on the research. So it's not like, it is like, how do you have to justify why you think that they have lack of confidence, and that's based on the literature? Is that what it is?
Yes, exactly right. So according to all of these researchers, they're saying this is the way, because lots of people have investigated and done interviews and everything and found out all these things. So, so what do we know already about this problem? We know a lot. Usually, sometimes there's research problems where we don't know really anything because it's something completely new. So you're saying this is all that we know, but there's still some gaps in the knowledge, and those gaps are causing a problem for someone. So for example, well, if we talk about HDRs, what is the actual problem? The actual problem is not completing, so we're making a big deal about the fact that there's we know all these things already, but there's some things that we don't know yet. And because we don't know them, we have this problem. Now, don't forget as well, the problem can be little, right? It doesn't have to be world peace, all right?
Yeah.
So it's a small problem, but it's a problem for someone somewhere. And once we can articulate why we should care about that problem, as I said, what do we care if researchers start their degree and then drop out? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Well, yes, it does, because now we've lost that knowledge that we could have potentially sorry. So you've got to make them care, right? And you're saying, yes, we know a lot of things about strategies to help students to write, but we can find more information because there's still a problem. There's still students who drop out. There's still students who don't complete. And that's a problem, because what about the time and the money and the resources when if they had have had a bit of extra support, maybe they wouldn't have dropped out. We would have had them complete. And then we've got this other person in the world who's a researcher and going to contribute to making things better in some way. So, in your mind, you will already know, okay, what your research is potentially going to find, and you just got to hold back, all right?
Hold
back. And all at this point, what are you demonstrating? There's a problem, that there's a gap in the knowledge, and that your research is going to help us to get insight into that problem, okay?
Right.
Then once you've collected the data and analyzed the data, then you're going to come up with all of those great solutions.
So when we are languaging, this is the problem, but at the proposal stage, we don't go into the details of where it's directing to. So then we may sound biased.
Yeah, so it depends on how many words and how much you can write, and that's all part of your critical thinking and your feedback to understand how much can you write, because it's just the proposal. So you really need to get to the crux of it and be very clear that this problem is affecting somebody, it's urgent, it's needed for us to fix it, because maybe it's costing money, which is what would happen with people not completing, right? It costs the government money, it costs the university, it costs the student money, even if you boil it down to something as simple as that. But usually there'd be more than just that. Maybe, whatever it is that your problem is, justifying the problem and the importance of someone, being you, spending time to gain more insight into it. So it's a balance, like everything.
So if the problem is let's say the significance of the research topic is something to do with mental health, right? And that's to do with society. So is that too big? Like as if we are trying to solve the world's problem here? So how do we make it like, or it's not as big, but then it is as big? Because, some topics are so directly in health related. Yes, then we come hospitals, patients, and so on. But then there are topics like mine where you are talking about mental health. So does that make it like I'm trying to resolve a societal, the significance is a societal issue? And is that okay, or is it too broad?
You need to have a balance of both, most likely, and it depends as well on your research design as to whether how much generalization are we going to be able to get from your study. So remember in my examples when I was saying, let's talk about the chemo patients, for example, and we're saying, well, it's going to be it's going to be good for the government, it's going to be good for society. But yes, exactly as you say, that is really big. But if you start with the small thing of your stakeholders, so in this case of that example, it's cancer patients, isn't it, who've undertaken chemo. So the first thing is it's going to help them, specifically them, right? And especially it depends to who your participants are. So if I'm only interviewing the chemo patients themselves and I'm not looking at anybody else, I'm not looking at any of the nurses, the doctors, the family, then really I need to just focus on the patients themselves and the benefits they're going to receive. However, we can expand and go a little bit further by saying, okay, once we know what's going to help the patients, of course, that's going to then help the other stakeholders. So that's all part of your problem. See how it's all connected. So my problem is then chemo patients get really sick and then they're taking up a hospital bed. Okay. So we look at the first part of that is it's not good that they're sick. Let's help them not be that sick that they have to be in hospital, that they can go home. But from that, it's very clear. If part of the problem is if they're taking up a hospital bed, that's costing the government money. That's health professionals have got to help these people, and they can't be helping the other patients that are in the hospital. So you can see how it all just expands out. So now if in that research, if I was, my participants were the patients and their families, then I can definitely start to say, well, then it's going to make it better for the families if they're able to be back and feeling well. So everything is connected to who are your stakeholders, who are you investigating, and from that, how widely can you go with your benefits and who. But as long as if the context of it, if part of to investigate is to ultimately save on resources, then of course you can talk about that in as far as what the benefits are. But if you in your introduction and your lit review don't even talk about the cost of running the health system, then you can't talk about that in as far as what your results are going to be. Right. But if you do talk about it, then you can then make that link that way. So when you're talking about mental health, then you're going to start quite broadly and say, mental health is really important. We need to have people that are feeling healthy in every way to be functioning in our society and being part of the society, right? And then you're progressing your scaffolding from broad to narrow at the beginning, and then later on narrow to broad. Okay, so the narrow part are the people themselves, then we come to their families, then we come to society or government. And so if you've mentioned them at the beginning, you can mention them. And don't forget, you're going to be justifying it by saying, you might have some statistics by saying, it's costing the government millions upon millions of money by having to, so the mental health plans that you can have via Medicare, right? And then you can draw from that. But again, it depends on exactly what you're investigating, Yes. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
This is why it's so hard. So excellent.
Yeah.
And this is why we're justifying and why everything needs to be linked. You can't all of a sudden at the end say, oh, okay, so my research is going to be really big and help the government if you haven't mentioned what the government has to do with it, right?
Yeah. Thank
Good
you.
luck.
And so I'm so sorry to go over time with this. So sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No problem.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. I think that's just about everybody. No one else has got a question. Thank you. Oh, nope. All right. So thank you, everyone. Don't forget the recording will be up later on today, and I will see you all again soon.